What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again, once again. So with Shadowkeep about a week away, I wanted to go ahead and talk about some of the things I'm excited about, as coverage for Shadowkeep has been rather mixed on this channel. One moment I have people calling me a fanboy and asking if the check has cleared! You know, when I'm not upset about the battle pass and even go as far as to defend it. Then, I'm a Destiny hater when I object to the senseless practice of removing content that people have paid for from the game. It's almost like Nuance is fucking dead. We took it out back and we shot it in the head. People act as if all reason and logic have abandoned us, and a multifaceted opinion can no longer fucking exist. But I digress. Videos like this allow me to lay my cards on the table and tell you, the viewer, what I'll be looking at when I review Shadowkeep. So, without further ado, let's dive in. In no order in particular, the numbers are simply here for simplicity's sake. We start with number 5, the lore. I'm gonna go ahead and level with you. Since Destiny 2 Year 1, hell, Destiny 2 Day 1, the lore and the story have been somewhat disenchanting. Destiny 1 lore had this really dark, Lovecraftian, stranger in a strange land, man at a time, fighting the hordes of darkness with eons of history in service to forces that we could never possibly hope to comprehend. The darkness was coming at us from all sides. The last vestiges of humanity were in this walled-off city, counting every day that we weren't wiped out by time-traveling robots, or the Hive, or the Cabal, or the Fallen, all of which are kind of analog or dark mirrors to ourselves, with the exception of maybe the Vex, but then you can argue that Guardians make their own fate, so the Vex can go back in time travel and they can make the future that they want, so there's that, but Destiny 1 had this really great premise, and all of this lore that allowed you to fantasize about the universe and kind of build your own conclusions. There was mystery, there was intrigue. Was the Traveler evil? Was the Speaker evil? Were we really the darkness? Did Rasputin shoot the Traveler? Destiny 1 did a really, really incredible job of, even when it answered questions, it left just enough for you to speculate, for fans to craft theories, for fans to try to put a puzzle together. The Book of Sorrow is a really great example of this. The first time that we're introduced to the Book of Sorrow is the Thorn flavor text, which reads, "To rend one's enemies is to see them not as equals, but objects, hollow of spirit and meaning. 13th understanding, 7th Book of Sorrow." This one string of text brought a religious fanatical depth to the Hive that explained a lot of what they did and why, but it also opened up for an entire book's worth of this content, a Hive Bible if you will. And that analogy isn't without accuracy. In the Book of Sorrow, we have the Hive creation myth, we have original sin, we have a deal with the devil, we have 2 instances of being cast out and leaving Eden, but because it's the Hive, the Bible analogy is of course kind of twisted and turned on its head. Eden was this hellscape. God literally wrote the Bible to make himself look better. In the Book of Sorrow, we read about the Faustian deal that the Hive made with the worm gods, and how it comes back to bite them in the ass. But learning about this deal answers just as many questions as it asks. And then you have the fact that the whole thing might be a book of lies because Savathun says so. But then Savathun is a trickster, but her tricks only work if they're able to trick you, so is it a book of lies? Is it not a book of lies? Are we supposed to think it's a book of lies, but it's not a book of lies? Or is it actually a book of lies? It's an interesting question because there has to be some basis in the Book of Sorrows to give us reason to doubt it. Destiny 2 doesn't have lore like this. Destiny 2 has fanfiction, lore that straight up misinforms you, lore that is canon, but written in such an excruciatingly conceited way that you have to read this entire book just to get a handful of relevant lore tidbits. And that wouldn't be so bad if it didn't read like the fanfiction of a young adult novel. Then there are personal stories about individual characters, which tend to be pretty okay world flavoring, if they are just a one-off thing and not entire books. And then, if you shift through all of that crap, you can occasionally find the one little nugget of lore that moves the story forward, or introduces an interesting concept or idea. With Shadowkeep being about the Hive, the darkness, and supposedly being darker, Bungie has an opportunity to really go back to its roots when it comes to the lore. More strange, mysterious, and unknown. Less fanfiction or worse, the Marzov version of Twilight fanfiction. And side note, because we're talking about this, can we not do that with Eris? While I'm sure somebody will be excited about how she had to drink her own pee to survive under the surface of the moon, yeah, you know what? They never have reconciled how Eris, without a ghost, doesn't age, doesn't apparently starve to death because she spent years under the moon, didn't die of exposure, yeah, but Shin Malphur was a kid, and the Drifter starved to death. Huh. One of these things is not like the other. One of these things just doesn't belong here. But I digress. It's actually kind of funny for how much lore that we've gotten over the last year. In terms of quality, Destiny 1 lore outstrips and spanks the vast majority of Destiny 2 lore. So I'm really hoping that with Destiny going back to the kind of cosmic horror style of Destiny, that the lore goes ahead and reflects that. Number 4, the story. And I'm not talking about the lore, we did just talk about the lore, but I'm talking about the story in and of itself. So Shadowkeep is going to be a Rise of Iron size DLC. That means in all likelihood it's going to have a 3 to 4 hour main story, if that. The time limit really isn't an issue for me, it never has been, it never will be. Movies tell excellent stories in half the time. Some of my favorite anime, like Maha Shoujo Madoka Magica, tells its story in 13 episodes. A short runtime is a really great way to trim the fat and tell a concise and meaningful story. Granted, there's an even larger importance on the story to land all of its story beats, but as opposed to larger stories, there's not much more to get wrong or get distracted with. If done with a clear and focused vision, a short story is a great way to express an idea. That said, the worst way they could go about this is to basically make Shadowkeep a condensed version of Forsaken, where you have one story at the beginning, but gasp, shock, there's a revelation, and in the 11th hour, everything changes. And then the story just really flounders for the next year and never gets resolved. So I'm really looking forward to see if they can actually land the short story. It's something they often have trouble with in the Curse of Osiris Warmind-sized DLCs, but maybe with a little more breathing room, they can land it. Number 3, Armor 2.0 Bro. So Armor 2.0 has a chance to really diversify the game. That being said, going into Shadowkeep, I know exactly what I'm looking for already. Something that is a cross between my stat split in Destiny 1 and my current perks that I have in Destiny 2, with enhanced versions when I get those perks. And I think a lot of people are going to be looking for armor that increases their super to the maximum amount, and probably their grenade. While Armor 2.0 looks like a great foundation on paper, it's only one piece of the puzzle, and unfortunately it's like a corner piece, the easiest one to figure out. Armor 2.0 will only come into its own once we get better exotics, both armor and weapons that play into the stat splits, and an overhaul to the subclasses, again that play into these stat splits. While Armor 2.0 is great, things like the Fellwinter artifact from Destiny 1, which allowed players to give up their super for 2 nades, 2 melees, and an increased charge rate on both of them, really changed the way that players were able to play the game. So far with Armor 2.0, even with the artifacts, even with every perk that we've seen in the finishers, I've yet to see something that really makes me think twice about building what I've basically outlined I'm going to build already. That doesn't mean that there won't be something there that makes me change my mind. That's why it's on this list after all. I'm excited to explore that. And this is clearly an obvious improvement to the way Destiny currently is. But we do need an Exotics 2.0, and we need a Subclass 2.0 to really flesh out what's been created with Armor 2.0. Number 2, the future of Destiny. Bungie has stated that they are, for the first time in forever, looking to, instead of building Monster of the Week DLC, actually move the story forward in a meaningful way with each DLC iteration, starting from Shadowkeep. That we can expect a stronger narrative thread throughout the next year, at least in regards to where the story is ultimately going. And while I'm sure that this will only take the form of lore, quests, and other written avenues, on top of a theme being explored, kind of almost exactly what we saw with Season of the Forge, Season of the Drifter, and Season of Opulence instead of story-based DLCs like we saw with Curse of Osiris and Warmind, it seems that Bungie wants the lore, the quests, and the overall theme of these Season Pass DLCs to move the story forward instead of just being a Monster of the Week type DLC. something, and I hate to be that guy to point this out, but that's how the DLC should have been since day one. And while I wholeheartedly, vehemently disagree with the removal of content that people have paid for to facilitate this, there's a video in the description if you want to see my full opinion on that, I do like the fact that they are taking steps to move the story forward. You know, at least more than once every year or every 2 years. Hopefully, while avoiding another Forsaken, where it seems like there's going to be a lot of plot moving forward to the next year, and it has a lot of momentum, and then it comes to a screeching halt 3 months later with Season of the Forge, and crashes into a brick wall. Number 1. A new dungeon. Dungeons in Destiny, in my opinion, and to be completely transparent, I'm counting the Whisper quest, the Outbreak Perfected quest, and even the Bad Juju quest as dungeons, alongside the actual dungeon, the Shattered Throne, have on average been way better than the raids, in my opinion. Raids in Destiny, the 2 full raids and the 4 raid layers, I don't care if they're calling them raids now, have been really hit and miss. The full raids generally being way better than the raid layers, and the raid layers batting about a 50%. You take the really inconsistent quality, more so with the raid layers, and you mix that with the time investment and getting 6 people together, on top of honestly some pretty lackluster loot, and you have something that can be somewhat of a pain to go through. Dungeons, on the other hand, have raid-like mechanics, they have hidden things, they have puzzles, they have entire quests. They can be done by one person, but like with most other things, are better with friends. In Shadowkeep, the raid is a Vex raid, likely because it either kicks off the Season of the Undying, or it is the Season of the Undying's raid. If it's the Season of the Undying's raid, that would kind of technically mean Shadowkeep shipped without a raid. Not that it really matters because Shadowkeep and Season of the Undying come out at the same time, I just thought that would be kind of funny. But going back to the dungeon. With Shadowkeep, we have the introduction of the Nightmare mechanic, where they're bringing back old bosses from the past. In a dungeon-like setting, that can create some really interesting dynamics for enemy encounters, if utilized. But like the Spartans said to Philip II, if. Anyways, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, those are the 5 things that I'm looking forward to, in no particular order, in Shadowkeep. Let me know yours in the comments below, and like always, stay frosty.